One of the most catastrophic events that had ever occurred in history is the Arab slave trade, which is also known as the Trans-Saharan Islamic slave trade. It's a silent genocide that is often overlooked and barely ever spoken about. When we think about slavery, we usually think about the Atlantic, post-Atlantic slavery. The European, that's what we usually think of. However, what many people don't know is the Arabs were in fact the first ones to enslave black people in Africa. The Arab slave trade commenced in the 7th century. It carried on for well over 1,300 years. Now, whether slavery has fully been abolished in the Middle East, that's one that has left a question mark. However, the catastrophic events, the conditions that the slaves were placed in were so bad. It's actually considered possibly worse than the transatlantic slave trade. Black men were castrated. They were emasculated. They were also forced into Islam. Same with the women as well. The slaves were used to transport goods such as copper, ivory, clothes to the Middle East. They targeted countries such as Ethiopia, Zanzibar, Sudan, Mozambique, Kenya, other parts of North Africa. The Arabization in Africa occurred also due to the inbreeding. Well, forceful breeding. They used women as sex slaves, children and women as sex slaves. It reached a point where the slave owners were even paying double the price for these poor victims. Around 50% of the people, which is considered around, well, based on what historians say, they believe around 9 million Africans were subject to this slavery, and so around 50% of them had not made it out alive. That was due to hunger, famine, falling ill, you name it. Many people had also unalived themselves. Till today, the impacts that it has had on Africa is relevant. It's still somehow evidential and it's relevant. Africa needs to understand something, that history does repeat itself. What's currently happening in Sudan, for example, is a result of it. The Arabization of Sudan has left our people in such dire, bad situations. And so I think it's time we start having more conversations about our history and start addressing the ugly side of it. Learning more about our history will enable us to come up with ways to improve the current state of our motherland, or else we'll continue to fall into this trap of losing our lives and resources and everything that we have to our oppressors. If you'd like to learn more about the Arab slave trade, I encourage you to take time out of your day to research. What I can say is, as it commenced at the 7th century, it started way before the Europeans, because the Europeans came around the 16th century. Also, I have to mention, they were the ones who taught the Europeans how to enslave us, to the point where they even had wars over us. But with all the piece of information that I have gathered regarding that, I could be here all day, but I encourage you all to go learn a thing or two. One love to Mama Africa, and Africa will never forget your history.